My name is Martin Hoskin. I'll introduce Oni in a moment. I'm a principal architect at VMware. I'm based out of the UK. I work in a team called Cloud Technical Services, which really encompasses all of VMware's cloud subscription services. So that's our VCPP cloud providers, VMware Cloud on AWS. It now includes some of the newer things that we're doing with Azure VMware Solutions, next year Google Cloud VMware Solutions, Oracle Cloud VMware Solutions. So anything that you pay for as a subscription comes under my group. And I'm the principal architect based out of the UK that really goes around and talks to our partners and their customers about what VMware is doing in this space. And one of the key things VMware has done in this space for our partners is the Cloud Provider Platform based on vCloud Director. Now, you will have seen yesterday in Pat's keynote, vCloud Director being mentioned there, and more specifically, VMware Cloud Director Service, the SaaS offering of VMware Cloud Director. And just from a naming perspective, over the next few months, you'll see the name vCloud disappear from VMware. So vCloud Director will become VMware Cloud Director. And that's why VMware Cloud Director Service is the naming for that solution. So you'll see a slight move in naming perspective there. But over the last 2 to 3 years, and actually the last 4 years, VMware heavily invested in that Cloud Director platform. With around 200 new engineers, you will have seen the HTML5 UI, the modernization of the API using open API standards, multi-site capabilities, container solutions, extensibility. There's a whole range of possibilities now in that service. And it actually is getting a lot of attention from cloud providers who've never, ever in the past used VCD. So names like IBM, Rackspace, now implementing VCD-based services because of the flexibility and the investment that VMware has made in that. And because also, as we grow, and vCloud Director on-premise and vCloud Director as a service merge into one, so you can consume both, and you can scale globally using the service whilst maintaining your own environment with your own closed data center environment, we're going to see a lot more of these challenges go away with Azure VMware Solutions as an endpoint, Google Cloud VMware Solutions as an endpoint. Exactly as Pat's slide was yesterday, really providing total flexibility and choice of where the resources come from. And it's cutting-edge partners that are really going to be leading the way there. And we've got one of these cutting-edge partners based out of Helsinki in Finland and actually across Europe here with us today. So this is Oni from Tieto. So I'll let Oni introduce himself.
Okay. Onni Rautanen from Tieto. We're a Nordic service provider. I'm acting as a technology director for our hybrid infra unit. So responsible for technology development and evaluating solutions like the VMware's cloud services on how to introduce those into our portfolio and how's the correct mixing of those in there.
Cool, brilliant. So really the first part of this session is going to be Oni talking about what they've built over the last 8-9 months from a cloud provider platform perspective. The newest versions of this iteration of this platform, providing choice and flexibility and all those sort of things that cloud providers are looking for. So Oni's going to present that initially. Then we're going to have a bit of a discussion and a Q&A to see what you're doing, because I'm guessing that most of you are cloud provider partner related. Am I right? Show your hands if you've cloud, yeah. Maybe some end customers as well. But the aim really is for you to understand the capabilities and what innovative partners are doing like Tieto and whether that's suitable for your customers and it's a road that you want to go down. So I'll hand over to Oni and I'll be quiet for a good few minutes. Oh, yes. I introduced myself, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll open up a bit first about Tieto and who we are and what we're overall doing in the market. And then how our portfolio is, and then diving in more details about how our VMware approach and that portfolio is. So this is now a bit kind of overall numbers and details on how Tieto is looking today, but there's a kind of a significant change coming to these numbers in beginning of next year when we're actually merging with a kind of similar company from Norway, so combining to Tieto Ebri, and after that the kind of positioning basically is that we'll be the leading player across all Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And then if we start looking at our portfolio and how our solutioning is looking like, then of course the kind of key question nowadays is that what is the correct cloud mix for the customer? What does the customer need? And the answer to this one is that there is no kind of generic answer. In the end, all of the different hyperscalers and all the local deployments and all the private data center deployments, they're all key and essential in the full solution and build up for the customer. And the practical kind of blueprint that will deliver all the kind of benefits and requirements for the customer will be unique and different for each customer and each use case that there is. So there is, of course, when discussing about these topics with the different providers, of course, each of the provider has a kind of a bit one-viewed approach that there's one correct way in these things, but in the end, as a service provider, we know that we need to look things a bit kind of from the customer angle, and from the customer angle, the technology picture looks a bit different. And here's then to reflect that is a kind of overview of our solution portfolio in the Tieto's hybrid infra area, which is then basically reflecting that we have all the hyperscalers covered, including their kind of on-premise private deployments. And in the middle part, then we're kind of focusing on the hybrid IaaS layer, which is then built around the VMware's portfolio, where we can then harmonize the IaaS delivery so that we have a unified way of doing that across all the different deployment places. And a short intro also that, of course, the kind of approach for us, even though that we are still a kind of private provider, the kind of building approach for the customer solution portfolio is kind of a cloud-first approach for us also, because in the end, there's a lot of services that are only available in the public hyperscalers. So that is in the end the approach that we need to see, that when deploying new solutions and things, we need to first look at the place which provides then the most additional value. So first looking at, can we run this on a public cloud, or do we need to go into private side for more security or other benefits, or do we need to even go into the edge and deploy the solution on a specific factory or other customer location. Then a bit more details on the hybrid VMware IaaS solution that we're now building up, where the intent is that we're approaching a kind of standard consumption model. So we're standardizing as much as possible on the actual technical pieces that are in the setup, towards which VMware has been doing a lot of good work on providing a kind of ready and packaged building blocks. So the intent is that we're on the bottom layer, we're harmonizing that it's the VMware's Cloud Foundation baseline that is the kind of architectural building block, which is utilized whether the solution is then built on top of our private clouds or on-site deployments or any of the hyperscalers. Then we have kind of architectural consistency, and the kind of outcoming deliverables are consistent. And then on the kind of service consumption layer, where the customer is actually consuming the services, that is then harmonized through VMware's Cloud Director service. And in that area, we're also evaluating then in the next phase, as the intent is to move towards consuming standard components, evaluating possibility of using the Cloud Director as a service approach. Then I have one slider about why we have been thinking that why do we need to move towards utilizing standardized solutions. And to kind of answer to that question, we need to a bit look how the kind of customer expectations and our delivery capabilities to answer those expectations have been growing in the course of time. So, of course, if we just first take the customer's expectations, those are, of course, exponentially growing. And then taking that to our kind of an ability to deliver according to those expectations. That's now something that we're considering that right now we're a bit at a turning point. That we can still do with the kind of building ourselves way. We can still meet that, but now it's kind of quite close to a place that we can't continue with that in the future. And let's look a bit on why is that. So, of course, in the beginning of time, the business was just IT outsourcing. And then, of course, when IT outsourcing was the business increased, of course, that made it more efficient and easy for us to do it and standardize and get more benefits and meet more efficiently the demands. And of course, flexibly, as a kind of outcome, we were able to then meet the customer's expectation on decreasing unit prices. And of course, when we had a growth curve, it was just plain and simple that delivery costs were decreasing. Then, when we were getting close to the time that the public clouds were emerging, which were bringing in new expectations. So, customers were expecting that everything needs to be delivered immediately. I just go and click into a portal and I get my service immediately. That was, of course, still doable. It was just automating the things that we had been doing in the past. But of course, to automate everything, that's already starting to kind of slow down our efficiency curve because we need to invest more. But then we get to the kind of a big issue point for our delivery point of view when the expectations from the exponentially growing feature set of public clouds are added to the mix. So when the customers are expecting that the feature sets and functionalities along with the instant delivery time are also included in the private deployments that we're doing, then we get into a stage where our lead time is expanding. We can still do it. We can implement and develop all the features that are there, but that is then kind of colliding with the fact that we can't anymore deliver instantly when we need to have more lead time to actually develop the services. So now the kind of answer and resolution to that point is that we need to move into a model where we start consuming standardized components. And as described in the previous slide, that kind of mix that we're now thinking is basically on the baseline VMware's Cloud Foundation and then a Cloud Director on top. And this way we can then again start decreasing our development costs and start getting more traction and kind of gap on top of the expectations that the customers have by adding more value-added services. And here's then my kind of last official slide on the portfolio that we're doing. So overall, how we're thinking about delivering our x86 services. So of course, on the private side, we have our bare metal as a service offering, which delivers our base hardware servers, and then we're kind of harmonizing that across the hyperscalers to the same extent that we gain the same base physical capacity delivery harmonization, whether the capacity is coming from private side or from the public side. And then we can compose on that, top of that our next level services. Which then, of course, can be just plain Windows and Linux servers coming out from the bare metal solutions, which is in some cases the customer demand, but more specifically here is then harmonizing on the VMware's Cloud Foundation stack which then can deliver the same feature set and functionalities both on private and public. And from there, we're then manifesting to the customer different service deliverables, which can be directly the components that are manifested directly out of VCF, like PKS, or just plain dedicated VMware capacity, or then through the cloud provider pod functionality layered on top of VCF, we can then do also the virtual machine IaaS capabilities with the same efficiency and model as the hyperscalers and those are doing. And when we're moving as much as possible and close as possible to standard components, then we can also do the lifecycle management very efficiently and gain extremely fast pace on the new feature set release cycle.
Okay, any thoughts before we start some question and answer here? Does this resonate with you guys? Is this what you expect to see from VMware cloud providers? Okay, so Oni, when customers come to you and they have more choice than ever before, they may have very complicated Azure-based systems, AWS-based systems that they're struggling to keep control of. They may have a in-house VMware platform. How do you package these things together in a way that resonates with that customer, that makes sense for them to work with Tieto?
Yeah. So the approach that we're trying to drive now is exactly kind of not just utilizing the standardized components, like for example from VMware, but overall also standardizing our portfolio as much as possible so that we can then do this customer-specific modeling on how does the customer solution look like, more basically in the sales phase and solutioning phase. We can move as much as possible the solution integration building away from the customized deployments into consuming standardized and readily integrated components together in the...
Yeah. And standardization is key, isn't it? Because, you know, if you want to build a different environment for every single one of your customers, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes,
Cloud,
that's a clear thing, as in the end, each and every customer solution is different, because the demands of all the customers are different. And that has been, in the past, the approach in many cases also on our side, that when we analyze the customer's demands, then we say that, okay, yes, this standard thing, it doesn't work for this. So let's go and buy some new boxes and let's build a completely customized set. But that drives us into the kind of challenge that with that model, we can't drive the customer's expectations about the instant delivery times.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to extend on that, the standardization of platform is key. The idea of cloud, whether it's Azure, AWS, Google, is that you provide a service and the customers come and consume that service. Is that you don't build a service for every single one of those customers. Because from a operational perspective, the costs obviously soar when you start doing that. I've certainly been to cloud providers in the past, in the Middle East, the one I'm thinking of, and their operating model was to wheel in the customer's data center into their data centers and adopt it. So they had about 100 different types of storage devices running in their data centers. How you operationalize that, I don't know. How you find people with the skills to be able to support 100 different storage solutions, I don't know. Could you talk about how you make decisions on that standardization? So, you know, I know you're a Dell house, effectively, but how do you look at ISV solutions and say, this is the solution that we want to consume because this will attract our customer base?
Of course, it's all about selecting the ecosystems that are relevant in our portfolio, and that in that picture we can see it's a bit slow to rewind. So basically, this is kind of a portfolio point of view reflecting the result of the ecosystem analysis that we have done, which is basically then based on our customer demands and kind of reflecting how do we resolve this specific customer demand? What is the technical solution that we need for this? So through that analysis, we have basically, on a high level, come to these boxes that these are the ones that we need to have standardized, and we need to have the delivery capabilities to enable these in a cloud-like manner when the demand comes in from a customer solutioning point.
Okay. And just one more question. I'm going to try and get some questions out of the audience if they're going to be chatty. What's the next big thing? What do you think customers are going to want in 2 years' time that you have to be ready for when they start asking for it in 2 years' time?
That's of course always in IT. What happens in 2 years is a marvelous question and extremely difficult to answer. But I think that the things that how we're moving now forward is exactly that kind of blueprinting and kind of automating the deployment of everything. Whether we're talking about then the factory application that was coded 30 years ago or anything, the kind of modernization of those deployments. How is that going to be done with the kind of least amount of wasted time, if we think about it like that? That as there was also in the keynote yesterday, a lot of mentions that in some the refactoring and that of applications takes an enormous amount of money. Yeah. But in the end, that is the key business that we need to focus also on our side, that the kind of fact that refactoring everything probably takes a lot of money, but it doesn't mean that we can't gain the same benefits that the refactoring does by some other ways. Yeah. So we need to look at the things from a more angles and not just think that, okay, in order to get to the cloud state, the only way to get the cloud state is by building everything completely again from scratch, which is of course, again, kind of looking back to the infrastructure modeling thing that I was talking about, that in order to have standardized components where we can then compose the delivery easily, yeah. Then you can also do the kind of more standardized solutioning that, okay, this application looks like this. The best way for that application to become efficient and kind of modernly built.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely. And I see, and I've been in these conversations where customers and partners are talking about application modernization, move into cloud-native platforms, and then they start talking about the cost of that, and then they start talking about the return on investment and what new functionality they will get. So if I take application A that maybe provides a CRM solution, I refactor it, I bring it into a cloud-native model, but I have no new functionality to that solution or no benefit. It's very, very difficult to sell that to the business and say, I need €500,000, whatever it might be, to have this application refactored. Okay, that's great. What benefit is that to the business? None. So what I see happening is this long-term coexistence where we have, application developers now want to work in this cloud-native manner. They want to be able to develop in AWS or Azure if that's what's important to them. But I see that as a separate coexistence bubble with everything we have at the moment. I still talk to customers who are running thousands of Windows NT machines. I've spoken to a customer this year who's running DOS in their data center, on a VMware platform. So we've got this long journey ahead of us where people are still...
And in some cases, it might be that still after 2 years, that DOS system might still be the correct solution for the specific case.
Absolutely.
It might just need a bit more security and things around the edges, but it might still be the best purpose built for that.
Absolutely. So we're just going to have this long-term coexistence where we're adding new application types, and they have to coexist and live alongside more traditional applications, more monolithic and multi-tiered applications, which may even live alongside these very old legacy applications, because businesses are not willing to invest money where they don't see a return on investment for that money in that modernizational program. And that's where we're going to see a lot of these benefits from Azure VMware Solutions, VMware Cloud and AWS, where these things can coexist very easily next to one another.
Yeah, and I think that in the next couple of years, it's always difficult to say what is the things that are coming in the next couple of years. Yeah. But the more likely thing that I still know that as kind of looking at the past, the things that are here now, they're not going to go away.
No.
Because that's the kind of habit of IT. There's constantly new things coming in. But there's nothing ever going out.
Yeah, that's the one thing of a software company. You might build, VMware deploy, announces a new product. We build it for a couple of years, then we put it on end of life. We've got to support that for 10 years. Yeah, no one ever thinks that the customers implement things. We might decide that there's no market for that solution and we want to end of life it, but we still have to continue to support it. And even when we end support it, people are wanting to pay additional money for us to continue to support it. So that's one of the big challenges for any software house. One more question: managed Kubernetes, is that something your customers? Kubernetes is a pain to implement, and of course VMware is trying to move into that market. It is a key market for us going forward. We're basically trying to buy, within this room, be honest, we're trying to buy our way into that market with things like Pivotal, Kubernetes, Heptio, etc. And having people like Joe Beda, at these events, talking alongside Pat. So do you see any of that demand yet? No? Yes.
There's quite a lot of demand for Kubernetes on the application development side and that. And in our kind of thinking, we see it as the modernized EOS offering, basically, that we need to have in our portfolio. Basically, the same way as we have managed EOS, we need to have managed Kubernetes deployments for our customers so that they can efficiently just get their coders out and plug them in and let them do their cool new stuff.
Absolutely. From a developer's perspective, whether you're running Kubernetes on vCloud Director, AWS, Azure, it actually is the same API. So there's no learning skills, there's no additional skills that need to be learned. I need to get the handheld mic because we are recording this session. So if you have any questions, if you could just raise your hand for the microphone. Is there any partners here who would like to maybe stand up and say a few things about what they're doing currently, and maybe they've implemented vCloud Director? Now, it's not time to be shy. This is a nice quiet room. We're hoping to have a good discussion here. Is the key driver? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for going first. Thank you.
Oni, can you explain about your PaaS services in your data center? Which services you have, and what's your plan, and how you build it? It's at top level, from top level perspective.
Yeah. So the intent how we are trying to move. This is now honest answer, as we have been kind of doing things differently in the past, but now we're kind of also trying to standardize across in the PaaS side in a way that once we have, if we look at this picture, when we have the EOS layers standardized on the bottom layer, then we basically do the kind of modern cloud way that we consume the APIs of the bottom layer to then build the next level services on top of that. That has been also a challenge for us in the past, where in many cases the kind of PaaS building way has been done always also from the ground up, which of course then also kind of complicates the lifecycle management and all these activities. But the clear intent now is that we also move in that into the kind of cloud way of working, so that we separate the physical infrastructure and the capacity delivery from the actual PaaS deliveries.
Okay. Can I ask, is there anyone here who's recently implemented a vCloud Director platform within their solution and would like to talk about that or highlight things they're delivering? It's a very shy audience we have here today. So my next point then, can we talk about storage and storage services? If we look at like Amazon, one of their biggest revenue generators is S3 storage, and the ability to mount CIFS or NFS to virtual machines. How do you look at that when those requests come in from a customer? Is it something you can self-service, or is it more of a managed type of solution?
Like S3 storages and these kind of services, in majority of the cases, those are quite managed solutions that in many cases we don't have a huge demand for a kind of developer type access into different storage types. But that's of course something that we're now intending to evaluate more, because because of course the kind of growth of the more developer-oriented and everything as a self-service is coming up more and more. So,
okay, and can you talk about your trajectory with the VCD offering? So many of you will know VCD offers a lot of flexibility now from extensions and adding services in and presenting those through the single pane of glass portal. Could you talk maybe a little bit about your strategy around service delivery through vCloud Director? Because that is key, and it's coming of growing importance.
yeah. Yes. So of course the kind of user experience that we're kind of thinking here, that when the user or customer is consuming the VMware ecosystem in the portfolio, then the expectation is that they can consume everything in this scope from the vCloud Director, so that they don't need to then jump out and go into different places to different portals, for example, backups and other activities, that they have a kind of single pane solution for that. And also regardless if they're not consuming just plain VCD VMs, that they're consuming a dedicated clusters, for example, or PKS, that then still the kind of interface towards the vCenter management with CPAM would be still the interface through VCD.
That was good. That was going to be my next question actually about CPAM. Yeah. Does everyone know what CPAM is in vCloud Director? Maybe I should explain that very quickly first. So within vCloud Director, we have the capability to publish dedicated vCenter services. So many actually of our biggest cloud providers across the world provide dedicated vCenter service. So you have your SDDC stack, or maybe it's just vSphere with managed or shared storage or some sort of infrastructure. You have that vCenter which you then expose to the customer. And many partners over the past have struggled to expose vCenter over the internet, because of course VMware doesn't recommend that. We've seen partners put in reverse proxies to be able to publish vCenter on the internet. Other partners just use a VPN and can obviously use a private network to get into that network and then access vCenter. In the 9.5 or 9.7 release of vCloud Director, we introduced something called Central Point of Management, CPOM. And what that allows you to do is for the customer to log into vCloud Director. They see the portal with all the different solutions available. They have a tile for vCenter. They click that vCenter, and it opens up a dedicated vCenter instance for them with dedicated hosts running underneath it, as if it was running in their own data center. It's the same experience. Effectively, we're just publishing it through vCloud Director. And what makes it interesting is that vCenter can be anywhere. It can be in the customer's data center, the provider's data center. It can be VMware Cloud on AWS vCenter. It will be Azure VMware Solutions vCenter server, or Google solution VMware Solutions. It can be any vCenter, but it can be surfaced and published through vCloud Director as a dedicated resource pool for those customers who want to experience or have a need to experience the vCenter API or the vCenter user experience. So that is, you haven't actually implemented this yet, as far as...
No, we don't have that implemented yet, as we're still kind of finalizing the plain VM to VCD use case scenarios, but then when we step into the dedicated vCenter cluster deployment.
Absolutely, and we've got some partners globally as well, outside of Tieto, who are implementing vCloud Director now for the first time purely for that CPOM solution, to simplify the ability to expose a dedicated vCenter to the customer. So you've got a single pane of glass. Of course, then you can obviously, from a provider perspective, you want to upsell, and you want to be able to add additional resources. Maybe that's a shared resource pool, VDC. Maybe it's object storage. Maybe it's a backup solution integrated into vCloud Director. However, it gives that flexibility to be able to present those solutions. Yes.
Why they previously doesn't cover each private vCenter with private vCloud? Is a simple job. You can always do it.
Yes,
from version 8.
So there's the reason it's about choice. You could provide a dedicated provider virtual data center or resource pool for a customer, and they could consume those resources in a fully isolated way dedicated to them. Absolutely, and it's more of cloud experience, but many customers want the vCenter experience. Maybe they've got automation against the vCenter API, maybe their administrators don't want to let go of vCenter, maybe they work in a particular way that requires vCenter templates. I agree, there's the two different models of consuming dedicated resources natively in vCloud Director and then surfacing those up through this CPOM solution that we're talking about. But it's about choice, and I don't want to name particular partners, obviously, but many of our partners who offer these dedicated vCenter solutions, this solves a problem for them of how they publish that on the internet. And obviously you've got single sign-on based in there through a SAML, VIDM token, etc. So it's all a nice user experience, but it also then allows the provider to upsell other services. So this customer might have a dedicated vCenter and infrastructure, but they might have their development environment running on Org VDC, or they might be consuming backup services through vCloud Director or object storages, which we talked about a little earlier on today. It's about flexibility, and that's key there. Any other thoughts, questions so far? Yes, sorry, if I can get you the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. One question regarding the service operations and service desk. So assuming you have your standardized building blocks, the lift and shift from skills and capabilities in your service desk and service operations I think is a critical component on your journey. Do you follow a specific strategy in training, education? Because there is no limit in combining services and technology in your stack, right?
Yes, but of course, if we look at the big picture, then this, in the end, simplifies the operational and service desk layers a lot, as the amount of different configurations for the customer's perspective, that's not changing in any shape or form, but the kind of practical way of how the technical underlay is done. From the previous, we have been counting how many different VMware deployments we have, and we're kind of running out of numbers in those calculations. So when we kind of consolidate the way we do the base infrastructure side, then we can actually make the actual operations side a lot more efficient and simple, and through that more quality also on that, because you know that when you do something in your VMware infrastructure, you always do it the same way.
Any other? Yeah, sorry. Excuse me, sorry.
Well, my question is regarding the standardized solutions that you mentioned earlier, and you said that the main reason is that when you tried to make a custom-made solution, you could not meet customers' delivery time requests. Mm-hmm. But what if still customers' request does not meet your standardized solution? What do you do then? Do you refuse, or you persuade customer to meet your standardized solution? Are your pre-sales engineers so good in order to make customer buy your standardized product, or you change your standardized product? And more, even if customer buys your standardized solution and then customer needs changes, and he requests something that you don't have in standardized. What do you do?
Yes, excellent question. So, of course, if we then go into the practical realities of life, then of course, standardization to 100% is never a reality. The main intent in this approach is that we don't make customization the default approach, that we kind of try to turn that around, that let's say 90% of the stuff will be standard, and then there will always be the 10% of things that are for various unexplainable reasons. Sometimes they still need to be custom, and because the server needs to be specific color or something like that, then those are always there. So it's never a no to the customer.
But it's always an interesting discussion, and I've done a lot of work with Amazon in the last few years. But how you manage resources and pre-stage resources for scaling, and I'm not allowed to discuss it, but most of you would be shocked about how little spare resources Amazon keeps in their data centers in many of those regions. It's surprising.
And of course, the one key thing here is that when the standardization is done on a modular enough level, then the kind of need for kind of fully customization goes into very extremely rare cases.
Yeah.
As in the end, when the bottom layer is that we have an automation on how do you deliver a bare metal server, then from that layer, that's in all likelihood, that's something that you never need to customize in the end. It's just a server. Then what do you build on top? Can I put in the standardized configuration of VMware on top of it? Or do I need to make a configuration drift there? And even if I would need to make a configuration drift there, it might still be that, okay, I can still plug in the same standardized module of VCD on top of it. So I have just the one layer in the full stack that is a bit drifted.
Yeah. It is a really interesting discussion, how you metal as a service, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But I have this conversation, I've had it a number of times this year. How can we, Mr. VMware, offer metal as a service? How can we provision things in an automated way and bring them up in a highly standardized way so we can add and remove resources as and when I need to? And the answer is absolute standardization on hardware so you can consume hardware-based APIs in that way. But it is a very expensive service to offer customers. And we see Amazon doing it. We see to some extent Microsoft doing it, and Google are moving towards that direction as well. But could you mention a little bit about your journey on metal as a service and why you think it's important? Because it's a conversation that's happening quite a lot.
Yeah. As the customer demands very much in the end, and if we look at what do we have currently in our data centers. We have all the possible hypervisors that the world has ever had, and all of these things. And now, how they have been before we had metal as a service ready. All of those were kind of from the data center floor up, built their own way, and we had no kind of lifecycle management possibility or anything to do a cross stack, for example, reuse of things. But now, when we do the kind of basic integration on the bottom layer, that whatever hypervisor, for example, you want to put on top, or do you want to put a hypervisor on top, you always get the basic physical box the same way. Then that in the end, it might not be a huge value as a customer sellable service, but it's a huge value from the internal lifecycle management point of view.
Yeah. And do you see demand for other hypervisor types? There was a conversation I had with a customer yesterday who wanted to be able to provision a Hyper-V host, an ESXi host, a KVM host, based on what their customer was asking for. Do you see that? I thought that was just crazy, personally. But
yeah, of course. If we look at our kind of portfolio overall, then of course we have the kind of. There are different type of hypervisors if we consider like Azure Stack and Outpost running EC2s in our data centers or Anthos. But of course, those are kind of ready and integrated solutions on their own, so not necessarily considered as hypervisors, but more extensions of the public cloud. But then in the kind of other hypervisors overall, if we consider what should we run on a private side on top of the x86 boxes, there is always a demand for example, Hyper-Vs and these kind of things for specific customer scenarios that they have. And it's, as all these kind of solutioning cases, they're not always very logical and kind of that kind of a way that and licensing terms and all kinds of things that come around.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask about licensing as well. You know, what sort of challenges do you see from your customers around licensing and moving things like Oracle, SQL, etc.? Because we know that those software vendors are trying to make things more difficult, particularly Microsoft at the moment, for moving workloads to third parties.
Yeah. There is, of course, with both Microsoft and Oracle licenses, that there's a lot of licensing bits and pieces depending on who owns the license, and if it's a customer license, if it's a rental license from us, or how is that, which in the end bring in a lot of specific requirements for the physical deployment. That it might be that, okay, the host needs to be dedicated to the customer, that it can't be running on any shared, or that it might be needing to run on a specific hypervisor or something like that in order to meet the licensing requirements. So that's also one of the key reasons that why the kind of virtualization stack needs to be automated from the bare metal up, so that we can meet the licensing requirements, as that's the most common scenario to need a dedicated host for a customer, is that software X requires licensing things.
Okay, and that brings nicely on to my last question almost, I think. We saw an announcement yesterday, Pat mentioned it in his keynote, but it was all over the IT press yesterday, about Microsoft allowing other parties to consume their services on their platforms. So as an example, Azure SQL running on Tieto, or Azure SQL running on Google Cloud. Basically, Microsoft are going to package these up as container-based services and license them to run externally. Do you see that as an opportunity or as a threat?
Yes, definitely. I see it as a great opportunity, both the RDS and then the, I think the official name was Microsoft Data Services.
Azure SQL was the one I think they're planning on doing first, but don't quote me on that.
Yes,
I read the article.
I discussed that with Microsoft today, and they said that service doesn't exist.
Okay,
So,
okay, they've renamed
so it was Azure Data Services on anywhere was the approach. But yes, that I think that it's a very, very healthy approach overall into the ecosystem, that more and more providers are moving into the approach that their services can be also delivered in the same manner on different platforms.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting step forward that you can run. You know, obviously we've worked with RDS running on vSphere. We'll see more of that from a function perspective, moving to be able to run on vSphere as well over the next few months. And then Microsoft are now joining this party and saying, we're going to let you run our proprietary services on another platform. Of course, Microsoft is still going to make money out of it. It's still SQL licensing or whatever licensing requirement they come up with for that. But I think that's really, really opening things up, particularly for partners, VMware partners, I think.
Yeah, and as if looking at the big picture, it's a kind of a similar approach that us as a managed service providers have been doing after the public clouds came out. That we needed to make the realization that our own data center is not the only place to run things. And we needed to kind of stretch our approach to the hyperscalers and do the similar thing as kind of the same way as we're now also doing with the VMware solution, to stretch the same ideology across all the deployment places. And now the kind of, in a way, newer comers into the capacity delivery game. Now they're making the same realization that, hey, we need to be able to deliver our services also on the competition's kind of capacity.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think where they go with that is going to be really interesting. Other questions from you guys, from the attendees? Anything that we've talked about today resonating with you guys? Thinking, that's interesting. That's interesting what Tieto have done. I know we've got quite a few providers here. Thank you for asking all the questions, by the way. There isn't a prize,
yes, now I try
unfortunately.
to explain about our experience. I'm from Data Line, as a Russian biggest service provider. And in next some months, we be together with Rostelecom, and we will be more than 5 times from next player. So we have make standardized services too. It's very important because it's so many new leads comes, and all customers want to have his own standard for this client deployment, but we try to give him our experience. We add technical account manager or architect to this project without any additional price and try to convert this business requirement from this customer to our standard business. We try to do it. In some cases it's okay, in some cases it's not okay. And for me it's very important to add here standard services from PPS services from service provider. For example, about 1 year ago, we started to give S3 based on Cloudian, and the sale activity was very small. We sell about 10 terabytes per half year. It's very bad. But next, we add databases services to our services and containers services. And when customers comes to containers, they ask for database, they ask for S3. And now we sell more than half petabyte of S3. It's very big growing. It's customers who migrate from Azure, migrate from IVS. They already gone here, and in Russia they now comes back because very pricey services. They cannot predict his price, and maybe we need to go to these customers and manage his activity in AWS. Maybe it's a big point for us. So, such point of view, we need to build standard services. I completely agree, and we need to add more services to be local Amazon and local Azure. It's my point of view. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you for your insight. And I would give you a copy of a book, but I'm actually not allowed to because it's like bribery. There's like rules. Anyway, thanks very much. Any other questions, actually, before we finish? Please fill in the survey. I get fired if I don't say that at least 3 times during sessions. We have to remind people because they love the survey results and they love statistics. You know what these event organizers are like. So please take a few seconds to fill in that. If there's no further questions, I'm going to let you go a couple of minutes early because you can grab some lunch, head of the lunch queue type of thing. So thank you really much for joining us. A really discussive environment. I look forward to speaking to a lot of you in future. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.